Why did the mountain feel like it was closing in on them? The ridges loomed like the jagged teeth of some great beast, their shadows swallowing the canyon whole. 24 Navy SEALs lay pressed against fractured stone, sweat mixing with dust, lungs burning as the night echoed with gunfire. Bullets carved sparks from the rocks. RPGs arced down like falling stars, each impact rattling the earth beneath them. Captain Thomas Reeves pressed his helmet against cold granite. His radio crackled with words he'd prayed he wouldn't hear. Negative on air support. Weather too severe. You're on your own until dawn. 7 hours. 7 hours until daylight. The men around him shifted, each carrying the same fear in their eyes but burying it beneath discipline. Still, Reeves felt the weight in his chest. 56 years old, he had survived Desert Storm, Somalia, a dozen black operations across continents most Americans had never heard of. But this felt different. It wasn't just an ambush. It was a trap. Somebody had known they'd be here at this precise moment, pinned in this valley with cliffs rising like walls of executioners. 200 Taliban fighters held the high ground. The SEALs were low on ammunition, cut off and surrounded. The odds were merciless. Reeves swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. "Hold positions," he growled into the comms. "Conserve ammo, we dig in until dawn." But he knew better. You didn't dig in against RPGs raining from every angle. You didn't outlast men who knew the ground, who had the high ground sealed. Not tonight. Not with no sky angels to save them. Private Barely 25 whispered into the chaos, voice trembling. "We're already ghosts, Captain, but ghosts don't bleed." And then the mountains answered him. Not with another RPG, not with the chatter of an AK, but with a single sharp crack. It echoed clean through the valley, one sound so precise it froze even the enemy for half a heartbeat. On the ridge above, a heavy machine gun that had been pinning Alpha Team went silent. Its operator slumped forward, forehead drilled through as if by lightning. "What the hell?" Reeves muttered. He whipped his night vision across the nothing, just jagged stone and shadow. Then another crack. An RPG carrier spun backward before his launcher could ignite, the warhead detonating harmlessly against dirt. Then another shot. A Taliban spotter dropped lifeless. 3 threats erased in seconds. The battlefield shifted. Not a storm, not a wave, but deliberate hands pulling apart a knot, one strand at a time. Whoever was out there was hunting with surgical precision. And the SEALs weren't the prey anymore. Reeves' radio hissed again, but this time it wasn't command, it was a voice. Low, steady. "Sierra Whiskey to Viper Team. Move northeast toward the compound. You'll have cover." Reeves froze. The call sign was unfamiliar, but the voice. His stomach tightened. It was her. Kate Morgan. The comms specialist. The same woman he dismissed as dead weight 6 months earlier. The one his men had mocked with the nickname Porcelain. Fragile, useless, out of place. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to have a rifle in her hands. But here she was, somewhere unseen, bending the battle to her will. Reeves wanted to demand answers, but the crack of another shot pulled his eyes upward. Another enemy dropped. Another corridor opened. His men scrambled forward, following the cover that came like the hand of a ghost. But inside, Reeves felt a flicker of something he hadn't allowed in hours. Hope. And beneath that hope, unease. Because Kate Morgan wasn't here by accident. And whatever she hadn't told him yet, it was about to unravel everything. 6 months earlier, Virginia. The room had gone still when Colonel James Harrison entered. He was 67, hair steel gray, posture unyielding. A legend in shadows, a man whose fingerprints were on every covert operation America had waged since the Cold War. Panama, Grenada, Desert Storm, Somalia. His reputation was mythic, the kind carved from decades of silence and sacrifice. But when he stepped aside, all eyes had gone not to him, but to the woman following in his shadow. Late 20s, hair pinned into a severe bun, blue eyes that met every stare without flinching. Her BDUs bore no insignia, only the flag on her shoulder. Harrison said, his voice low but commanding, "This is Kate Morgan. She'll be your communications specialist for Operation Kingfisher." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Captain Reeves rose slowly. 15 years commanding SEAL teams had taught him to speak plainly. "With respect, Colonel, my unit is already full. We've trained together for months. There's no place for—" "I don't recall asking for your opinion," Harrison cut in. The air dropped 10 degrees. Every SEAL in the room felt the tension crackle between the two old soldiers. Reeves' jaw tightened. Everyone knew their history. Panama, 1989. A mission whispered about, never explained. Something had broken between Harrison and Reeves, and it had never been repaired. Harrison turned to the woman beside him. "Ms. Morgan comes with unique qualifications. Olympic gold medalist in precision shooting, top of her class at, fluent in Pashto, Dari, Russian. She'll be an asset." Reeves looked her over. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. "This is a combat unit, Colonel," he said flatly, "not a social experiment. I was commanding SEAL teams while you were still qualifying at Bud S," Harrison replied, his voice edged like steel. Kate Morgan finally spoke, her tone calm, almost disarming. "Captain Reeves, I'm not here to disrupt your team or prove anything. I'm here because I have skills your mission requires." Reeves studied her face, searching for weakness. He found none. But he didn't believe her, not yet. The men didn't either. By nightfall, they'd given her a name: Porcelain. Fragile, decorative, breakable. They had no idea. Kate had grown up in the shadow of rifles. While other girls collected dolls, she collected spent casings. Her father, William Morgan, had been a SEAL sniper with an almost unnatural gift for precision. Weekends weren't for cartoons or sleepovers. They were for the range. "Breathing is everything," he would whisper as he adjusted her stance. "Slow your heart. Feel the space between beats. That's when you squeeze, not pull, squeeze the trigger." She had learned too well. By the time she was 10, her hands were steady enough to rattle older men at the range. By 13, her father had given her his heaviest lesson. "Promise me something," he had said the night before his last deployment. His eyes had been darker than usual, his voice weighed with something he wouldn't explain. "The mission is important, but the people, they're everything. Never leave your team behind." 2 weeks later, James Harrison had knocked on their door in dress uniform. She'd known before he opened his mouth. Her father had died in Mogadishu, classified, redacted, buried in silence. But Harrison had promised her one thing: he never left anyone behind, and I'll never leave you behind either. For years she had believed him. For years she had trained under him, carrying her father's ghost into every decision. And now, 6 months ago, she stood before a team that hated her presence, with a captain who had no faith in her, carrying secrets even they weren't allowed to know. Secrets she had learned to keep. Because Kate Morgan wasn't just a communications specialist. She was something else entirely. And in the Afghan night, with 24 SEALs about to be erased from the earth, she was about to show them. The night roared again with gunfire. RPGs streaked, grenades shook the canyon. The SEALs huddled, expecting the end. But then another shot cracked. And another. And the impossible happened. The tide was turning. And none of them knew it was the woman they had called Porcelain, who now held their survival in her crosshairs. Reeves pressed against the rock, heart hammering. He could hardly believe it, but he knew the truth already. She was out there. And if she hadn't been, they'd all already be dead. Why did she even show up that early? The training field was wrapped in morning fog, the obstacle course looming like the skeleton of some prehistoric beast. Kate Morgan stood at parade rest, her boots sunk slightly in damp earth, the cold mist clinging to her hair. She had arrived 45 minutes early, but Captain Reeves was already there. Pull-ups on a steel bar, each movement precise, like a machine unwilling to rust. When he dropped down and wiped sweat from his forehead, his eyes flicked toward her, skeptical, measuring. "Early," he said, "I'll give you that much. My father taught me punctuality is the courtesy of kings, Captain." "Your father," Reeves muttered. Then his expression shifted just slightly. "William Morgan." She stiffened. "You knew him." "Briefly, Somalia, 93. Different unit, same hell." His gaze lingered on her face as if searching for something buried there. "He was one of the best snipers I've ever seen behind a rifle." "He was better than good," she answered softly. Reeves said nothing more. When the rest of the team arrived, he turned cold again, like the conversation had never happened. 12 men, elite of the elite. Their eyes held curiosity at best, hostility at worst. She could almost hear the unspoken words behind their stares. Why her? Why now? Why here? "This is Morgan," Reeves announced. "She'll be handling communications for Operation Kingfisher. Today we find out if she can keep up." The smirks came instantly. Porcelain. They hadn't even said it aloud yet, but she could see it forming in their minds. The obstacle course didn't care about reputations. The wall, the pit, the rope climb, every station was designed to break already hardened men. Kate approached each with discipline. She wasn't the fastest. She wasn't the strongest. But she moved with precision, economy, no wasted energy. The mud pit swallowed her whole, barbed wire scraping against her back as she crawled. The rope climb tore her palms raw. Her body screamed in protest. But she didn't stop. And then came the rifle qualification. Targets from 100 to 800 yards. Each man ran 400 meters before firing. Sweat, breath, adrenaline all working to break accuracy. They were good, hitting 80, 90% under pressure. When it was her turn, Kate ignored the whispers, the smirks, the bets already being made. The whistle blew. She ran, dropped, raised the M4. "Breathe, slow your heart. Feel the space between beats." Her father's voice. Bang, bang, bang. Each shot perfect, center mass, headshot perfect again. By the time she finished, the range was silent, every target down, record time. "Again," Reeves ordered, his jaw tight. She ran the course again, same result. "I've never seen shooting like that," Walker, Reeves' second in command, whispered. "Not even from you." "She can shoot paper," Reeves said coldly. "Field conditions are different." And he was right. The stress shooting course nearly broke her. Smoke, strobe lights, metal music, blanks fired near her ears. Civilian silhouettes popping up beside enemy targets. Her rhythm cracked, her breathing faltered, precision dissolved into chaos. She hit only 60%, worst score of the day. "That's the difference between range and reality," Reeves said flatly. "Olympic shooting doesn't prepare you for chaos." Kate nodded, accepting the blow. "I'll work on it." "See that you do. Your father never missed, not even under stress." The words cut deeper than he realized. That night she sat alone, field stripping a sniper rifle piece by piece, trying to rebuild more than just steel. A knock at the door. Harrison entered without asking, closing it behind him. "You made quite an impression," he said. "Perfect score on the range. And a disaster in the stress course. Your father struggled with chaos too. Precision shooters usually do. It can be learned." "I don't have time to learn," she said bitterly. "We deploy in 6 months." "You'll be ready," Harrison said with absolute confidence. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've arranged for you to have access to the stress course at night. No observers, no records, just you and the targets." Kate frowned. "Why?" Because Kingfisher isn't what they think it is, and you're not just a communication specialist. What aren't you telling me? Everything you need to know, he said, standing. Especially your night shooting and your climbing. Climbing. The mission brief mentions nothing about climbing. Exactly, Harrison said, his back already to her. When he left, Kate sat frozen, rifle in her lap, pulse pounding. He was playing a deeper game, and she was a piece on the board. The next 3 months broke her down and rebuilt her. Days with Reeves punishing, unrelenting. Nights alone on the stress course, training in secret. Her body grew leaner, harder, her mind sharper, her hands steadier. The gap narrowed, but it never closed. The nickname stuck, porcelain, sometimes whispered, sometimes thrown directly at her. Useless, fragile, a liability. But she endured. She had endured worse. Until one night she found Reeves at the memorial wall, alone. His hand rested on a single name, Michael Harrison. "The colonel's son," she whispered. "You know about him. Only that he died in Panama." Reeves' laugh was bitter. That's one way to put it. He told her the story then. The 5-man team, the bad intel, the ambush, Michael wounded but alive, the order to abandon him, the argument that cost them seconds, the loss of 2 more men, Michael bleeding out. And Harrison taking the intelligence, earning a commendation, leaving 3 bodies behind. "That's who you're following," Reeves said darkly. "A man who will sacrifice anyone, even his own son." Kate's throat tightened. It didn't match the Harrison she knew, the man who had raised her after her father's death, but she could see the truth in Reeves' eyes, feel it in his voice. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. "Because whatever game he's playing, when the moment comes, he'll sacrifice you too, just as quickly." Then he walked away, leaving her staring at names etched into metal. The next morning, she confronted Harrison at the rifle range. "Is it true," she asked after nailing a perfect grouping at 600 yards. "That I left my son behind?" Harrison's eyes stayed on the target. "Yes, the intelligence saved hundreds of American lives. The cost was 3." Her voice cracked. "Including your own son. The hardest decision of my life, but the weight never leaves." "Why me?" she demanded. "Why put me on this team? Why make me part of your game?" "Because Operation Kingfisher is more complex than they know. The man we're extracting isn't just a scientist. He's a weapons designer. Information suggests a missing suitcase nuke, possibly already in Taliban hands." Kate's blood chilled. "And my role as a comms specialist? A cover. Your real purpose will depend on how the operation unfolds." "So you're using me, just like you used Michael, just like Reeves says." Harrison placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm trusting you, absolutely. Your father would have understood." "Don't use him to manipulate me," she said sharply. "I'm preparing you." And then he whispered about the eastern ridge, the one missing from every briefing map, the one that gave complete overwatch of the valley. "Why tell me this if I'm just a comms operator?" "Because information is ammunition, Kate. Load accordingly." That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Reeves' warning echoed. Harrison's calm certainty lingered. Her father's voice whispered in memory. "Never leave your team behind." And as the days bled into nights, she realized something. This wasn't just another mission. It was a reckoning. One that would test not just her skill, but who she was. And whose side she truly stood on. Why did the map feel like it was lying? The briefing room smelled of coffee gone cold and bodies worn thin by training. Satellite images plastered the walls, a compound cradled by jagged mountains, ridges like stone teeth waiting to bite. Colonel Harrison stood at the front, pointer in hand, face carved from iron. "And Ms. Morgan," he said, nodding toward her, "this is your target, a remote compound along the Afghan-Pakistan border, Taliban-controlled, Inside, Dr. Alexander, nuclear physicist. Our mission, extract him alive. Kate's eyes traced the terrain. West side insertion. Northern cover. Guard post circled in red, but her gaze pulled again and again to the east. The ridge towered above everything, dominating the valley. And yet it wasn't marked. She raised her voice before she could stop herself. Sir, what about the eastern ridge? It appears to provide full overwatch of the compound. Harrison didn't flinch. Too steep, too exposed, a death trap. Insertion will be from the west, that's final. Reeves frowned. She's right. From that ridge you could see every move. Why not put a spotter there? Because no one could reach it without being detected. The climb alone would take hours. Harrison's tone was smooth, decisive. With respect, Colonel, Kate pressed, the rock face looks scalable during night hours. Predicted cloud cover. The silence was instant, heavy. A junior operator, challenging the commander in front of the entire team. Reeves' eyes flicked toward her, half surprised, half impressed. Harrison's jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. An interesting theory, Morgan, but unnecessary. The plan stands. The briefing rolled on, extraction routes, contingencies, call signs, but Kate felt Reeves' gaze linger on her, thoughtful. After dismissal, footsteps followed her down the corridor. That ridge bothers you, Reeves said quietly. It should bother you too. It's the perfect overwatch. Why are we ignoring it? Because Harrison doesn't want it used. You think he's hiding something? Reeves' mouth curved, not into a smile but into a grim line. This mission doesn't add up. A Pakistani nuclear scientist held by Taliban doesn't fit. If he defected, he'd be in Islamabad, not a mountain cave. Kate's pulse quickened. Then why are we here? Because we're not being told the whole story. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. When we deploy, stick to protocol, but keep your eyes open. If things go sideways, I need to know I can count on you. You can, Captain, whatever happens. For the first time since she joined, his eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. I believe you, Morgan. Let's hope we don't have to test it. The C-17's engines droned across the Atlantic. The SEALs checked gear, each man wrapped in his own silence. Knives sharpened, magazines counted, radios tested. Kate sat apart, flipping through comms protocols, or pretending to. Her mind churned with other calculations. Harrison's cryptic warnings, Reeves' suspicions, her father's promise. The hum of boots against the deck drew her eyes. Harrison sat beside her, his voice low. All set with your gear? Yes, sir. Primary and backup systems green. Good. His tone shifted, private. Remember what we discussed. Hard choices. They may come sooner than you think. If they do, I'm counting on you. Her throat tightened. And what choice is that exactly? The Eastern Ridge. His words were almost a whisper. If the opportunity presents itself, take it, but only if absolutely necessary. Before she could answer, he rose and walked away, leaving her with a knot twisting in her chest. Later, Reeves found her near the rear of the aircraft. His face was shadowed, his voice tight. Morgan, a word. He handed her a small, palm-sized device. What's this? Specialized comms, secure frequency, encrypted, bypasses chain of command. She blinked. Sir, this isn't standard protocol. Neither is whatever game Harrison's playing. You think he's setting us up? Reeves' jaw clenched. I think Harrison's agenda doesn't always include team survival. Panama taught me that. Kate weighed the device in her palm, feeling the trust it carried. Reeves had been her harshest skeptic. Now he was giving her a lifeline. Understood, Captain, she said, slipping it into her gear. When she glanced back up, his eyes were steady on hers. Always have a backup when Harrison's involved. Always. The wheels touched Afghan soil at air base. From the tarmac, the mountains rose like watchmen, unforgiving, silent. At forward operating base Chapman, Kate set up her communication station, screens, radios, satellite feeds humming in sterile light. Officially, she was to stay here, safe behind concrete. Unofficially, she knew better. Harrison entered the bunker, blue light from the displays washing his face in cold shadow. "Final check, Morgan. All systems operational." "Yes, sir, all green." "Good." His voice dropped. "The situation has evolved. Latest intel suggests the target may be moved within 12 hours. Enemy forces larger than we thought." Kate's pulse kicked. Captain Reeves already mentioned that. Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly. Did he also mention his request to abort? She stayed silent. "He lacks vision," Harrison continued. "This mission is worth the risk. A suitcase nuclear device, potentially en route to American soil as we speak. We cannot afford delay." He placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm. "Remember what I told you, the ridge. If things go wrong, you know what to do." After he left, Kate stared at her reflection in the black screen of a powered-down monitor. Was she a soldier, a pawn, or something worse, both at once? The answer would come soon, too soon. 4 hours until deployment. The SEALs prepared in silence. Rifles checked, knives sharpened, prayers whispered only in the privacy of hearts. Kate maintained her station, pretending to focus on screens. In reality, she was making decisions Harrison hadn't calculated. Among her gear lay climbing equipment, ammunition, the rifle Harrison had mysteriously arranged for her. She would go to the ridge, but on her terms, not his. When the helicopters lifted into the Afghan night, the comm stayed steady, her station glowing blue. But Kate Morgan was no longer at her desk. Through a blind spot in the floodlights, she slipped past the wire, into the dark, toward the ridge no one else dared climb. Because Harrison had told her to. Because Reeves had trusted her to decide. Because her father's voice still whispered, "Never leave your team behind." Why did the mountain feel heavier than the gear on her back? The night was cold, the kind that burned the lungs with every breath. The eastern ridge loomed above her like a jagged scar against the starlit sky. The air smelled of dust and frost, and every step forward carried the weight of doubt. Kate Morgan moved alone, rope slung across her shoulder, rifle strapped tight, hands raw against rough stone. Every sound, her boots scraping rock, her own breath, the faint whisper of the wind funneling down the valley. Below, the helicopters drifted like shadows. 4 birds cutting low, carrying Reeves and the team toward the compound. Their rotors were distant now, barely a hum against the silence of her climb. She could almost hear their voices, the jokes muttered under breath, the ritual silence before combat. She wasn't there. She wasn't one of them. And yet, she was their only chance if this ridge gave her what she thought it would. Her hands shook as she clipped rope into anchors, scaling upward. The cliff was harsher than she'd imagined, shale giving way under fingers, dust cascading into the void. Once her boots slipped and her stomach dropped into nothingness. She pressed her forehead against cold stone, eyes squeezed shut. She thought of Reeves, of the device he'd slipped into her palm. Trust unspoken. She thought of Harrison, his voice commanding, manipulative, impossible to ignore. And she thought of her father, his steady hand on her shoulder, his words. "Slow your heart, feel the space between beats." She inhaled, exhaled, climbed again. Hours bled into one another. Muscles screamed, fingers blistered, sweat chilled against her skin despite the freezing air. At last, the ridge flattened beneath her palms. She pulled herself over the edge, collapsed onto jagged stone, chest heaving. The view stole what little breath she had left. Below, the valley stretched wide, the compound a dark cluster of buildings caged by ridges. Lights flickered, shadows moved, figures patrolled, and beyond them more, fighters pouring in from the north, from the east, not a garrison, an army. Harrison had lied. This wasn't an extraction. It was an execution. Kate's stomach twisted as she pulled from its case. The rifle's weight was familiar, almost comforting. She extended the bipod, settled prone, scope cutting the night into green shadows. Her crosshairs found them instantly. Taliban machine gun nests along the RPG teams crouched in wait, spotters whispering into radios. Positions invisible to the SEALs below. Positions Harrison hadn't marked. Her comm crackled, Reeves' voice steady calm. Viper 1 to command, insertion successful, moving toward compound. Her hand hovered over the radio. Should she reveal herself? Break cover? Not yet. Not until she had no choice. She adjusted scope, controlled breath, found the first target. A machine gunner with perfect line of fire over Alpha Team's path. Her finger curled around the trigger. Squeeze. The crack tore through the night. The man folded backward, lifeless. No one noticed at first. The valley was already a storm of motion. But then her second shot came. Another RPG gunner slumped. The warhead clattered harmlessly. By the third, the enemy realized. Shadows darted, fingers pointed toward the ridge, but too late. She was already adjusting, firing, killing. Below, Reeves' team pressed forward, bewildered. Cover that shouldn't have existed was clearing before them, like unseen hands pulling threads from a knot. Viper 2 moved, corridors open. Reeves barked, seizing the chance. But his eyes flicked upward, toward the ridge. And he knew. Kate shifted position, crawling along stone, heart pounding. She had seconds between shots, seconds before they'd find her. Her radio hissed, a voice sharp commanding, Harrison. You're on the ridge. Her blood froze. Yes, sir, she forced out. I told you only if necessary. It was necessary, she hissed. They would have been cut to pieces. Stay focused, he said coldly. Do not engage unless absolutely vital. Your purpose is observation. Do you understand? Observation, while men bled below. Her hand trembled over the radio. She almost answered, almost obeyed. Then a flash below. An RPG streaked toward Bravo team. No hesitation. She fired. The warhead detonated midair. The blast lit the canyon like daylight. Morgan, Harrison's voice was sharp, furious. She muted the channel. No more orders. Only choices. The compound erupted. Fighters poured from hidden tunnels, ambushes snapping shut like jaws. Tracers painted the dark. Reeves' voice cut through the chaos. Contact front, break. Kate's scope tracked them. She saw pinned, round sparking inches from his head. She squeezed, dropped his attacker. Saw Walker bleeding, crawling for cover. Another shot, another kill. Each trigger pull was a battle inside her. The part that feared being exposed. The part that longed to be invisible. And the part that refused to let them die. Her father's voice guided her hands. Slow, calm, space between beats. But something else filled her chest, a weight heavier than the rifle. Fear. Because she knew this was only the beginning. The enemy found her at last. A flash of muzzle fire tore inches above her head. Chips of rock stung her cheek. She rolled, pulled the close, fired blind. A shadow dropped, but more moved in the dark. They were climbing, hunting her. Kate's lungs burned as she crawled backward, reloading. Her hands shook now, not from weakness, from the realization that she had crossed a line. No going back. No more hiding. Reeves' voice crackled through the secure comm he had given her. Morgan, that you up there? Her throat tightened, she pressed the button. Yes, Captain. A pause, then I knew it. Do you trust me? She asked, the words raw. With my life. She swallowed hard, tears stinging her eyes despite herself. For months, she had fought to be seen, to be trusted. And now, in the middle of hell, the man who had doubted her most had just handed her everything. Then listen, she said. You're walking into a kill box. I've got angles you don't. Move northeast, follow my fire, don't question it. Another pause, then copy that. The line went dead. Kate set her cheek to the rifle, steadied her hands, and became what her father had trained her to be. Not porcelain, not fragile, not forgotten. A sniper, and the only thing standing between her team and annihilation. Hours bled into minutes, minutes into seconds, each shot its own world, each kill a delay against death closing in. The thundered until her shoulder bruised, until her ears rang despite protection. Still they came, climbing, circling. She felt the ridge trembling beneath the weight of boots. And in the pauses between firing, she felt something worse. Guilt, because no matter how many she dropped, it wouldn't be enough. She couldn't save everyone. She never could. And her father's promise, never leave your team behind, pressed against her chest like a wound she could never close. By dawn, the valley was smoke and fire, dozens dead, both sides broken. The SEALs were still alive. Because of her. But on the ridge, surrounded, Kate Morgan lay with only one magazine left. And she knew this was only the beginning of the real fight. Why did silence suddenly feel more dangerous than gunfire? The ridge was still, too still after hours of chaos. Kate Morgan lay prone, cheek pressed to the cold stock of the, lungs burning, ears ringing from the unrelenting thunder of her own rifle. Smoke curled in the valley below, rising like ghosts from smoldering ruins. The SEALs had survived the night. Barely. Bodies littered the compound, friend and foe indistinguishable in the half-light of dawn. Reeves' voice had gone hoarse on the comm, barking orders, dragging his men from cover to cover. But up here, Kate's war wasn't finished. Her last magazine sat heavy in her pouch, 12 rounds, that was all. And they were coming for her. Movement flickered in the periphery, shadows crawling across stone, scaling upward, not clumsy, not rushed, disciplined. Whoever was climbing for her wasn't ordinary Taliban. Their movements were coordinated, practiced. Kate slid the bolt, chambered another round, and whispered to herself, "Slow your heart, space between beats." Her crosshairs found the first climber. Crack. A spray of dust, and he dropped, rope tangling around his lifeless body. Another climbed past him, faster now. Crack. 2 down, but still more came. Her radio hissed, Reeves' voice, urgent raw, "Morgan, report you still with us." On the ridge, hostiles inbound, multiple. "Hold position, we'll get you." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that they could fight their way up this cliff, but she knew the truth. He didn't have men to spare, not after last night. She was on her own. Below, Reeves crouched behind a shattered wall, blood caked down his arm. His men were battered, bruised, but alive. Somehow alive, and he knew why. Morgan. Every shot she had fired, every kill she had made, had bought them seconds. Seconds they'd turned into survival. He remembered the way he had dismissed her at briefing. Porcelain, fragile, a burden. Now she was the reason they still drew breath. But as he scanned the valley, his chest tightened. The enemy had shifted focus. Too many fighters ignored his team now, angling instead toward the eastern ridge, toward her. They knew where she was. "Morgan, listen," Reeves said into the secure comm, voice low but fierce. "You've already done more than anyone could ask, but you need to get out. Do you hear me? Break contact." And there was silence. Then her voice, steady despite the storm around her. "Negative, Captain. If I move, they'll overrun you. I stay." Reeves swore under his breath. She had her father's steel. He knew it now, too late. Kate's rifle barked again. Another climber dropped, his grip loosening into the void. She shifted position, crawling backward along the ridge, trying to buy time. But then she froze. One of the climbers wasn't aiming for her. He was securing something. Anchors, lines. Not just to climb. To haul something up. Her stomach knotted as she adjusted scope. A shape below, metallic, crude, but unmistakable. A mortar. They weren't just coming for her. They meant to turn the ridge into an artillery nest. From here, they could rain shells straight into the SEAL's last position. She had minutes, maybe less. Her last rounds weren't for her survival. They were for theirs. She exhaled, steadied, fired. One climber down, the others screamed, surging faster. She fired again, and again. The thundered, bruising her shoulder, tearing her palms raw. But for every enemy she cut down, another appeared. Her scope caught a glint then, higher up the slope. A figure crouched with binoculars, calm amidst the chaos, directing, coordinating. Not Taliban. His gear was too clean, too professional, Western. And in that moment, dread washed through her. This wasn't just an ambush. This was orchestrated. By someone who knew how they moved, how they fought. By someone inside. Reeves dragged into cover, bullets snapping overhead. The young operator's leg was shredded, blood soaking the sand. "Stay with me, kid," Reeves growled, pressing a tourniquet. His radio buzzed, Harrison's voice, calm, too calm. "Viper actual status." "Bad," Reeves snapped. "We've got wounded. We need extraction now." "Negative," Harrison replied. "Too hot. Hold until conditions stabilize." "Stabilize," Reeves spat. "We're dying out here." Mission priority remains. The scientist must be secured at all costs. Reeves' jaw tightened. At all costs, the words struck like a knife. He glanced at his men, exhausted, bleeding, alive only because of Morgan. And Harrison still spoke of costs like numbers on a ledger. Reeves switched to the secure comm he'd given her. "Morgan, you were right, this isn't just bad intel, it's a setup." She didn't answer at first. Then in a whisper, "I saw him, a spotter on the slope, Western gear, not Taliban." Reeves' gut twisted. Then Harrison sent us into this, he knew. Silence stretched between them. Heavy with betrayal, neither wanted to speak aloud. Finally, Reeves said it. "Whatever happens, don't let him own you too. You hear me?" Kate's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him she understood, but all she could manage was, "Copy that." The climbers reached her. Hands clawed at stone, voices shouting in Pashto. Kate dropped swung her sidearm free, fired point blank. One fell screaming. Another grabbed her arm, knife flashing. She twisted, slammed an elbow into his throat, shoved him back into darkness. She was running now, scrambling across uneven rock, lungs tearing with each breath. Gunfire snapped behind her, stone splintering. Her boot caught, body slamming against sharp edges. Pain ripped across her leg. She crawled forward, dragging herself behind a boulder, chest heaving. Her pistol clicked empty. Last magazine gone. And still they came. Down below, Reeves saw the ridge spark with muzzle flashes. Tiny, desperate bursts. His chest burned with fury, with helplessness. He wanted to reach her, wanted to drag her off that cursed mountain, but his men needed him here. That was the cruelty of command. One life weighed against many. But Reeves knew the truth. She wasn't just one life anymore. She was the difference between their survival and their graves. And maybe she was the only one who could expose what Harrison had done. On the ridge, Kate pressed her back against stone, knife in hand now. The enemy closed in, boots crunching closer. Her father's voice whispered in memory, "Never leave your team behind." But who would save her? And in that moment, she realized the truth. Maybe she wasn't meant to be saved. Maybe she was meant to save them. The first shadow lunged around the boulder. She drove the blade upward, felt the shudder of impact. The second slammed into her, weight crushing. She fought, teeth clenched, vision narrowing. And then a crack, clean, echoing. The man on top of her stiffened, a red hole opening between his eyes. He collapsed. Kate gasped, shoving him aside, turning. Her lay abandoned yards away, but the shot hadn't come from her. It had come from below. From Reeves. He stood on the compound wall, rifle braced, smoke curling from the barrel. His men dragging wounded behind him, his own body trembling with exhaustion, but still fighting for her. Their eyes locked across the distance. And in that look there was no rank, no skepticism, no fragile nickname. Only trust. Only survival. But the moment shattered as mortars began thumping into place below the ridge. The enemy had hauled one up after all. Time was gone. And Kate knew the next choice she made could damn them all, or save what little they had left. Why did the air feel thinner than before? Kate Morgan crouched against shattered stone, chest heaving, knife slick in her hand. The ridge was alive with enemy voices, shouting, circling, climbing higher. The smell of cordite clung to her like a second skin. Smoke drifted in the first pale light of dawn, curling upward like a warning. Her lay too far to reach, her pistol empty, her body bruised, bleeding, trembling from the weight of everything. And still she refused to fold. She closed her eyes, inhaled. Her father's voice whispered across the years, "You don't fight the whole war, you fight one shot at a time." Her hand steadied. When the first enemy rounded the boulder, she moved without thinking. The knife flashed, burying to the hilt. His body dropped heavy against hers. She shoved it aside, heart pounding. But the others didn't hesitate. Boots thundered across rock, shouts rising. Her throat tightened. She had seconds, maybe less. She crawled for the, dragging herself across jagged stone. Fingers reached. Metal kissed her palm. She rolled, shouldered the rifle, breath tearing through her chest. And she fired. The man in front of her spun, dropped. Another climbed higher, fired again. The recoil crushed her already bruised shoulder. Another body fell. But the ridge was swarming. Shadows moved like a tide, and she had only 4 rounds left. Down below, Reeves pressed his back against a half-collapsed wall, rifle braced across his knees. His men crouched in the dirt, battered, burned, eyes hollow. They had fought through the night, but dawn had brought no salvation. Only the reality of how close death had come. Lay pale, his leg bound by blood-soaked tourniquets. Walker's arm hung useless, bone shattered. Others clung to consciousness by threads. And above them, on that cursed ridge, Morgan fought alone. Reeves knew she wouldn't last much longer. The comm crackled, and Harrison's voice slid into his ear like ice. "Viper actual report." "We're still in contact," Reeves growled. "Heavily engaged. We need immediate extraction." "Negative," Harrison replied, calm as stone. "Air support not viable until the valley is cleared. Continue to secure the target." Reeves swore under his breath. "We're bleeding out here. We've got wounded. Morgan's about to be overrun if we don't move." "Morgan is not mission priority." The word stopped Reeves cold. His chest burned. "Say that again." "You heard me, Captain. Is the priority. If Morgan falls, so be it. Do not compromise the operation for one operative." Reeves' hands clenched around his rifle until his knuckles whitened. His men watched him, eyes searching. They heard it too. They knew what it meant. It wasn't just neglect. It was betrayal. On the ridge, Kate squeezed off another shot. The roared, echoing across stone. A body fell, rope unraveling. 3 rounds left. Her cheek pressed against the scope. The world narrowed to one eye, one target, one choice. She could almost forget the pain in her arms, the sting of sweat and blood in her eyes. Until her radio hissed. Reeves' voice raw. "Morgan, Harrison just gave the order to leave you. He says you're expendable." Her stomach twisted. The words felt heavier than the rifle in her hands. She had always suspected Harrison played a deeper game. But hearing it, spoken by Reeves, carved into reality, broke something inside her. Her throat closed, but she forced the words out. "Copy that." Reeves' voice softened. "Morgan. Captain, you've got wounded. You've got a mission. Don't break it for me. You're not expendable, not to us. The words cut deeper than any wound. For months she had been porcelain, fragile, out of place. Now he said the one thing she had never believed she'd hear. She mattered, but that truth came too late. Because shadows surged again, swarming her flank. She swung the fired, 2 rounds left. Reeves slammed his fist against stone, rage spilling through him. Harrison's voice echoed in his mind, at all costs. And suddenly it all snapped together. The missing intel, the eastern ridge ignored, the numbers that didn't add up. Harrison hadn't just miscalculated. He had orchestrated this. Thrown them into a valley designed to bleed them dry, while keeping Morgan on a leash, dangling between pawn and sacrifice. Reeves felt the sickness rise in him. Panama all over again, the betrayal of a commander who counted lives as currency. Not again. Never again. He grabbed his radio, looked his men in the eyes. We're not leaving her. Walker, bleeding but defiant, nodded. Damn right. Pale but conscious, whispered through clenched teeth. She saved us all night. We're not letting her die alone. Reeves exhaled, the decision sealing in his chest. Then we hold this ground. We buy her time, no matter what it costs. Kate's last 2 rounds were gone. The clicked empty. She let it fall, the weight dragging into stone. Her knife found her hand again, trembling but ready. The climbers were close now. She heard their boots scraping, their shouts, the metallic clang of gear. Her body screamed to run. Her mind whispered it was over. But her heart, the part her father had shaped, refused. She rose to her knees, knife steady, eyes burning. If they wanted her, they would bleed for every inch. Then the valley thundered. Gunfire erupted below, fierce and unrelenting. Not enemy fire, not Taliban. SEAL fire. Reeves' men had unleashed everything they had left. Covering fire raked the ridge, pinning climbers, forcing them into the dirt. Explosions cracked, grenades bursting against stone. Kate blinked, chest heaving. They weren't retreating, they weren't leaving her. They were buying her time. Reeves' voice roared through the calm, hoarse but unyielding. You hold that ridge, Morgan. We'll keep them off you as long as we've got breath left in our bodies. Tears blurred her vision, cutting through grime on her cheeks. She pressed her forehead against stone, whispering to herself. Don't you dare give up, Kate, not now. Her hands fumbled for the empty. No rounds, no pistol, just a knife. And still, she lifted her chin to face the storm. Because she was porcelain anymore. She was their shield. And shields didn't break. Reeves fired until his rifle clicked empty, then switched to his sidearm. His men did the same. The valley became a furnace, smoke and dust choking the air. But Harrison's voice cut through the chaos again, cold, sharp. Viper actual, stand down, secure, that is an order. Reeves ignored him. Captain, Harrison barked. If you disobey, you'll face court-martial. Do you understand? Reeves' jaw locked. His men looked at him, waiting. He pressed the button. His voice was low but steady. Sir, with all due respect, you can court-martial me in hell. He dropped the radio into the dirt, crushing it under his boot. For the first time in years, Reeves felt free. On the ridge, Kate felt the shift. The enemy slowed, hesitated. Fire from below tore at their flanks, driving them back. She gripped her knife, her chest heaving. But she knew it was only temporary. The SEALs couldn't hold forever. Their ammo would run dry. Their bodies would break. And when they did, it would all come down to her. She pressed her back against stone, eyes closing for a moment. The weight of sacrifice settled heavy on her shoulders. She had wanted to prove herself, to show she belonged. Now the proof was written in blood, hers, theirs, everyone. And she understood the cruel lesson her father had never spoken aloud. Sometimes keeping the promise meant not survival, but surrendering everything. The sun edged higher, spilling pale light across the ridge. The enemy regrouped. The valley shook with the thunder of war not yet done. And Kate Morgan prepared for the last stand she had been born to make. Why did the world sound hollow, like it was echoing from inside her own chest? Kate Morgan pressed her back against the ridge, knife still slick in her hand, lungs burning. Dawn light spilled across jagged stone, painting every shadow sharper, every wound more visible. The lay useless at her side, her pistol empty, her body battered. She had nothing left but will. Below, the valley roared with fire. Reeves' men rained what little ammunition they had, each round a declaration they would not abandon her. Their voices carried in bursts, short commands, curses, prayers whispered under gunfire. But the enemy wasn't broken. They were regrouping, swarming. Kate heard them calling to one another in Pashto, directing fire, climbing higher. A dozen boots scraped stone. Her chest tightened. This ridge had given her control, a vantage point to save lives. Now it was becoming her coffin. She braced, knife steady. If this was the end, she would face it head-on. Reeves' rifle clicked empty. He tossed it aside, grabbed another, fired again. The air was thick with dust and smoke, stinging his eyes. His men were running on fumes, unconscious from blood loss, Walker cradling a shattered arm, others down to sidearms and grit. Yet they kept fighting, because Morgan was still on that ridge. And Reeves refused to let her die there. But the truth clawed at him with every passing second. Harrison had set this up. The ambush, the ignored ridge, the impossible odds, it wasn't negligence. It was intent. Reeves' comm buzzed with static. Harrison's voice cut through, cold and precise. Viper Actual, report. Reeves ground his teeth. He didn't answer. Morgan is compromised, Harrison continued. She was never mission essential. Do not waste resources on her. Your priority is extract him at once. Walker spat blood into the dirt, muttering, "'S already dead weight. We saw no sign of him in that compound." Reeves' stomach dropped. He knew Walker was right. They hadn't even glimpsed the so-called scientist. The entire mission was a lie. He grabbed the comm, voice raw. "You set us up. This was never about, was it?" Silence. Then Harrison's tone shifted, lower, more deliberate. "The mission is bigger than one team. Sometimes men must be sacrificed to secure the larger strategy." Reeves felt bile rise in his throat. "You're still writing Panama, still playing God with lives that aren't yours to gamble." "You don't understand," Harrison snapped. "This war isn't won by valor, it's won by leverage. And Morgan." Reeves cut him off, voice hard. "If you so much as speak her name again, I'll come back and put a bullet in your head myself." He ripped the comm out of his ear, hurled it against the wall, and stomped it under his boot. The men around him stared, stunned. Reeves drew a steady breath, then said what they needed to hear. "We're getting her, all of us, or none of us." On the ridge, Kate's knife shook in her grip. Her muscles ached, arms heavy as lead. And then she saw him. The spotter, the one with clean gear, too professional for Taliban. He crouched on a ledge across from her, binoculars steady, calm amidst chaos. His lips moved into a radio, coordinating, directing. And in his calm, she saw the truth. This wasn't their fight. This wasn't about a scientist or a weapon. This was staged. An experiment. And she was the variable. Her blood ran cold as his gaze lifted, binoculars lowering, eyes meeting hers across the gap. He smiled. And in that smile, she recognized something that made her stomach twist. Training discipline. He was Taliban. He was American. Reeves ordered 2 of his last uninjured men to cover while he climbed. His hands scraped stone, boots slipping on shale, body screaming with exhaustion, but rage drove him. Not at the enemy. At Harrison. At the betrayal that had turned loyal men into expendable pawns. Every foot upward was a promise, a vow that Morgan would not be abandoned. Walker called up, voice hoarse but fierce. "Captain, they'll cut you down before you get halfway." Reeves growled back, "Then they'll have to cut me down first." His heart pounded, not just from exertion but from the weight of command. He had lost men before, but never like this, never to a commander's betrayal. If he couldn't save Morgan, then all of this, every death, every wound would mean nothing. Kate's hands trembled as she pressed herself to Stone, watching the spotter raise his weapon. Not an AK, an M4, standard American issue. The shot cracked, chipping Stone inches from her head. She ducked, ears ringing. Her mind spun. If this man was American, if he was part of this, then Harrison's hand reached deeper than she had feared. Her father's death in Mogadishu, Harrison's guardianship, the secrecy of this mission, it all twisted together, threads of a web she hadn't seen until now. She whispered to herself, voice breaking, "What did you get me into, Dad? What did you leave me in his hands for?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to weep, but there was no time. Boots thundered closer. Shouts rose. She lifted the knife, every nerve alight. And then she heard Reeves' voice, closer than she expected. "Morgan, hold on." Her chest clenched. She almost didn't believe it. But there he was, hauling himself over Stone, face bloodied, body shaking but alive. Behind him, 2 SEALs fired wildly, covering his ascent. For the first time in hours, she let herself feel something fragile. Hoping. Reeves reached her just as another enemy lunged over the rock. His sidearm barked, the man fell. He dropped beside her, chest heaving, eyes fierce. "You're not dying here," he growled. Kate laughed bitterly, tears burning her eyes. "I've got one knife left, that's it. Then we'll use it together." The moment was raw, stripped of rank, of pretense. Just 2 soldiers, bound by survival and betrayal. The enemy circled, regrouping. The spotter shouted orders in perfect English. Mortar tubes scraped against stone. Reeves loaded his last magazine, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Listen to me. Harrison wanted us bled out here, wanted you tested, maybe broken, but I'm not giving him that, not now, not ever." Kate's throat tightened. "Why me? Why test me?" Reeves glanced at her, eyes dark. "Because you're more dangerous than he can control, and men like Harrison don't tolerate what they can't control." Her chest ached. The truth was heavier than the rifle she could no longer fire. But Reeves wasn't finished. "Doesn't matter why. What matters is this: you're not expendable, not while I'm still breathing." The ridge exploded again. Mortar shells thumped into place. Gunfire tore against stone. Kate and Reeves crouched together, back to back, as the world closed in. Her hand found the knife. His hand braced the pistol. And in that impossible moment, something shifted inside her. Not just the will to survive, but the clarity her father had tried to give her all those years ago. Sometimes keeping the promise didn't mean living. It meant choosing what and who you were willing to die for. The enemy surged again, screaming, climbing, firing. Kate rose with the knife, Reeves beside her with the pistol. Their stand had begun. And somewhere, far away in a command tent, Harrison listened in silence, knowing his experiment was reaching its end. Why did the dawn feel more like an ending than a beginning? Smoke rose in thin, ghostly threads from the valley. The compound burned, a skeleton of shattered stone and blood-soaked earth. Above it, the eastern ridge groaned with battle, rifles cracking, mortars thumping, shouts echoing like a hymn of violence. Kate Morgan stood with her back to Reeves, knife trembling in her hand. Her arms were lead, her body battered, but she refused to drop it. Reeves' pistol barked beside her, each shot ripping holes through the swarm closing in. And still they came. The American spotter barked orders in perfect English, his voice calm, efficient. The enemy moved like soldiers, not insurgents. Their fire was precise, their lines too clean. This wasn't the Taliban. This was orchestrated. And they were the test subjects. Kate's breath caught as a round sparked inches from her cheek. Reeves dragged her lower, teeth gritted. "Stay down," he growled. She spat dust, chest heaving. "We're not making it out of this, Captain." "Yes, we are." "You don't believe that." "No," Reeves said quietly, reloading his last magazine, "but I need you to." The ridge shook under another mortar. Fragments tore across Kate's arm, hot pain blooming. She bit back a cry, blood streaking down her sleeve. Reeves yanked her closer, covering her with his own body. Her throat tightened. No one had ever done that for her before. Not Harrison, not any of the men who'd called her porcelain. But Reeves had. And in that moment she understood the truth. He hadn't just trusted her, he had chosen her. The knife slipped in her hand, not from weakness, from the weight of the decision forming in her chest. She whispered, almost to herself, "There's only one way this ends." Reeves turned, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare." She met his stare, her voice steady now. "If they take this ridge, they'll rain mortars on you. None of you will make it out, you know that." Reeves shook his head violently. "We'll hold, we'll find a way." "There's no time." She pressed the knife into his hand, fingers closing over his. "But you can still get them out. You're the only one they'll follow." Reeves' voice cracked. "I'm not leaving you, don't ask me to." Kate's chest burned with the weight of it all, her father's promise, Harrison's manipulation, every bullet she had fired in the night. "Then don't leave me," she whispered. "Just remember me, that's all I ask." The enemy surged again. Reeves fired, dropping 2-3 before his pistol clicked empty. He swung it like a club, slamming a man back. Kate lunged with bare hands, knife long gone, fury and survival driving her body. They fought side by side, raw, desperate, primal. Stone slick with blood, air shaking with screams. But numbers overwhelmed. Reeves staggered, slammed to the ground, a rifle butt cracking against his ribs. Kate screamed, throwing herself between him and the next strike. A shot cracked, not hers. The American spotter fired not at Reeves, not at Kate, but at his own man. The fighter dropped. Confusion rippled. And then the spotter spoke, his voice low but carrying. "Enough." The enemy stilled, weapons lowered, eyes flicking between him and the two bleeding Americans. Kate's chest heaved. She stared at the man through blurred vision, rage and disbelief twisting inside her. "Who are you?" she demanded. The spotter smiled faintly. "Insurance. Harrison wanted to know what you were capable of. Now we do." Her stomach turned. This was never a mission, it was a test. He nodded once, "And you passed." Reeves forced himself to his knees, pain etched into his face. "You slaughtered my men. For what? To see how long she could last." The spotter didn't answer. His silence was its own confession. Kate's vision blurred with tears, rage boiling over exhaustion. "My father died for you people, believed in you, and you used him the same way." The spotter's expression didn't change. "Your father was strong, you are stronger." Kate's body trembled with fury. She wanted to lunge, to rip his throat open, but Reeves' hand closed around her wrist, steady, grounding. "Not like this," he whispered. She swallowed hard, the knife's absence cutting deeper than any wound. The spotter gestured, and just like that, the enemy began to melt away, slipping back into shadows. The ridge fell silent. The valley lay broken. And Kate Morgan was left with nothing but the truth. 2 days later, airbase. The survivors walked off the bird in silence. 10 men left from 24, faces pale, eyes hollow. Kate walked behind them, her arm in a sling, bruises painting her skin. Reeves limped at her side, his body a map of scars that would never fade. Colonel Harrison waited on the tarmac. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just nodded as though numbers on a page had been balanced. Mission accomplished, he said flatly. Reeves' jaw locked. He wanted to kill him, to tear him apart right there on the runway. But Kate's hand brushed his, the faintest shake of her head. Not here, not yet. Harrison's gaze lingered on her. You've proven yourself, Morgan. There will be other missions, bigger ones. You're ready. Her chest burned. She thought of the ridge, of the men who had died, of the spotter's calm smile. No, she said softly. Harrison blinked. What? I'm done. Her voice didn't shake, it carried. I was never your soldier, I was my father's daughter, and he taught me never to leave my team behind. You'll never understand that. For the first time, Harrison's mask cracked, a flicker of something, anger or perhaps fear. But she turned away before she could see more. Reeves followed, limping but steady. Together, they left him standing in the shadow of his own lies. That night, Kate sat alone by the barracks, staring at the stars over the wire. Her body ached, her mind replaying every shot, every scream. She thought of her father, of his lessons, his steady voice. She thought of Reeves, the trust he had given her when no one else would. She thought of the men who had fallen, their names etched in her heart. And she whispered to the night, to the ghosts, I didn't leave you, I never will. Her eyes burned, but she let the tears fall, not weakness, not shame, just release. Because survival wasn't victory. It was carrying the weight of those who didn't make it home. And that weight was hers now, forever. The story spread in whispers, of a sniper who had turned the tide, who had held a ridge against impossible odds. Some said it was luck, others said it was myth. But those who had been there knew the truth. It wasn't luck. It wasn't myth. It was Kate Morgan, the woman they once called porcelain, the woman who saved them all. And in the silence that followed, the moral stood unspoken but clear. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It doesn't break. It simply acts.